Welcome to the complete animation of Ellie from Ice Age Collision Course. So, this movie, just like the other Ice Age sequels, has really weird naming scheme all across the world. For international releases, like in, Norway or probably Great Britain, just this movie is just called Ice Age 5. But in North America, or at least the United States, this movie is Ice Age Collision Course. There's no 5 anywhere in this movie in America, which is not a big deal, honestly, but I just find it interesting just how differently they market movies around the world. But one of the things that really stood out to me as I was combing through the footage of this movie to make this complete animation is just how good this movie looks. This is, to date, right now there's been announced an Ice Age 6, but to date, this is the most recent Ice Age movie, and I think it still really holds up visually. If you don't like the Ice Age art style and character designs, then those are still the way they are. But everything else about this movie really just has stood the test of time. It looks good. And I really like the lighting and the coloring. Because if you've been with me this far, one of the things that I have constantly harped on and on about is how often the lighting, especially in Ice Age 1, 2, and 3, how often the lighting just felt flat. How there didn't feel like there was much atmosphere around. But this movie fixes it. Holy cow, the lighting in this movie is incredible. And not only the lighting, just the color grading. The way that the image is colored with the scenery's color, and just everything about this movie is gorgeous. There's scenes where it's a nice sunny day and you get a view of the mountain landscapes, and he's like, wow, this movie looks really good. Those trees are so green. It's there's green and then there's green, and this movie has green, and it looks so good. But one of the things that kind of stuck out to me while I was making this complete animation is how much this story just doesn't really make sense to me when it's not going at full pace and I'm just thinking about each scene individually. Like this opening scene where Ellie is putting on a big anniversary party for all the other animals. It's first off, does that even really make sense? Because what happened to their anniversary and them being, when were they ever married? It's this is the first time in the entire series that marriage is a thing. Before that, it was just oh, they're animals. I guess they're going to be together now. But now it's oh, there's whole marriage things. Where was that for the last 2 movies? And I really dislike the way that the whole surprise party was put on. Because it felt taking the worst parts of sitcoms and foisting it upon this story. Because, in terms of, sitcom storylines, there's always one where, the less emotionally mature dad forgets about the anniversary for him and his wife, and there's a whole big to-do about it. And this movie does it, and I don't like that. First off, I take the advice that my mom gave, where she's this isn't my anniversary, it's our anniversary. It's my job to remind my husband as much as it is for me to remember it. So, him forgetting our anniversary, that's basically me forgetting to remind him about our anniversary. Now, if he forgets my birthday, that's something else, but, what is Ellie even doing putting on a party like that? She should know Manny better than anyone else. She should know whether or not he would remember something like this and be able to put on and remember to, put on something special for it. And it also just insults her intelligence when she totally buys that the meteor shower that is somehow making fireworks, they're really good looking fireworks, by the way, but somehow making fireworks, that he was responsible for that. Like, that whole entire part of this plot just really doesn't do it for me. And then the other major complaint I have with this movie is the cast is too big. Let me see if I can name them all. You have Manny, Sid, and Diego. Great. Then you have Ellie, Crash, and Eddie. So we're up to, 6 characters now? Although Crash and Eddie really are just one. They're more like one character. They're one character with 2 faces. So we'll lower it down to 5. There's 5 characters. And then we have Peaches, Shira, Granny, and now Buck. And Peach's fiance. I don't even remember his name. But there are just too many characters. And what ends up happening is the characters that are there this entire time never feel like they have anything. It's like Diego and Shira, they should not have been in this movie. I'm just going to say that. Like, they shouldn't have been in this movie. If you're not even going to let them, participate really, if you're not going to make them have any meaningful contribution to the story, they just shouldn't even be there. And it's like, what is their character arc in this entire movie? They start the movie saying, we're thinking about having kids, but we're not very good with kids, and kids find us scary. And then at the very end of the movie, they're like, oh, we're going to tell a story to these kids, and it's not going to be scary, and we're going to be ready to start a family of our own, potentially. It just really doesn't. I just really don't think it works. And there are so many characters in the main cast that when you start mixing in all the characters that they meet along the way, like the Shangri-Lama and what is her name, Brooke? I think that's her name. The sloth who finally finds Sid attractive. I just think that this movie has some fundamental issues. But it's weird, because in spite of those issues, I still think that when you watch this movie on its own, start to finish, it ends up being a pretty decent movie. In fact, I'd say that it's better than The Meltdown. Yeah. I have no idea what people are talking about when they say Meltdown is the best. The Meltdown, like, when I first saw The Meltdown, I was like, this isn't even very good at all. Then I watched it again, it's like, all right, this is all right. But, yeesh, The Meltdown. Not nearly as good as people make it out to be, but not as bad as I used to make it out to be. And seeing this movie and seeing what it's able to do with, this is Blue Sky. They were a premier animation studio back in 2016 when this movie released. They were able to make this. It makes me really curious what the upcoming Ice Age 6 is going to look like. Because who knows who's going to work on it? Like, there's 20th century animation, but to me, 20th century animation, which is sort of like the pro-tem animation studio that Disney made after they shut down Blue Sky, it really feels like an at-will animation studio. I don't think there is any like permanent staff there. It feels like it's just like a label for animation studio that they spin up for one contract and then is immediately disbanded. So I really wonder, what is that studio going to be able to accomplish? And where's that studio even going to be made? Because like it or not, the premier animation that is made in the United States is often, not always, but often superior to animation made on contract overseas. I think the only big exception to that is Illumination, because their big studio is in France. And holy cow, Illumination movies are gorgeous. And it's interesting to see just like how much of a overlap Blue Sky and animation and Illumination have. Because if you remember, Blue Sky was the studio that made Horton Hears a Who. And then one of the first movies that Illumination made was Horton Hears a not Horton Hears a Who, is the Lorax. And if I remember right, a whole bunch of the major creatives that worked on Horton Hears a Who ended up going to Illumination for that. So it's like Horton Hears a Who is really like a pre-Illumination movie that just happened to be made at Blue Sky. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about Blue Sky shutting down now. Because I don't even know if I would have wanted to see what it would look like if Blue Sky had finished Nimona. Because that was the movie that they were making. Holy cow, Nimona. I have so many issues with that movie. I could fix every issue I have with Nimona just by removing. Not even, just removing parts. But I can't talk about what I dislike about Nimona on YouTube because, this is a very... I can't even talk about it. That's how sensitive of a subject it is. I can't even talk about everything I dislike about Nimona without getting canceled. The science in Ice Age Collision Course is complete bunk, but nobody expected it to be anything serious. But it does make me wonder about them getting Neil deGrasse Tyson to be in this movie, because Neil deGrasse Tyson is basically famous for being overly critical of scientific inaccuracies in the most mundane of places. And so him being willing to be a voice actor in a cartoon that plays so loose with science seems a bit almost anachronistic. And going back to what I said about characters feeling like the cast is too big, so a bunch of characters don't really have much focus. That applies to Ellie in this movie as well. She, especially this third act where they're putting things together, she really feels like she's taking a back seat and is just there, mostly like Shira. Although, of all the characters that really feel like they're just there and aren't doing anything, it's Shira. Shira takes the cake for being a victim of the bloated cast in the Ice Age movies at this time. And so what are they going to do with the cast in Ice Age 6? It can't be this big. It can't be bigger. They can't have all the characters that they had in this movie and have Peaches, her husband, whatever his name is. I can't even remember his name. I've seen this movie all the way through 2 times, and then I've edited a bunch. I don't even remember his name. But what are they going to do? They can't have this entire cast again and then add more characters on top of it. So here's what I say. No Buck. Buck is cool. He was the best in Ice Age 3. He was weird in Ice Age 5. But no Buck. And no Peaches and no husband. You can make reasons why they're not there, but yeah, none of them. And what else? Who else can you cut out? No Granny. Yep, Granny is not there anymore because she is now staying with the Shangri-Lama being young. Get rid of Crash and Eddie. Yeah, Crash and Eddie, no. They're like, we already have enough dumb with Sid. And maybe get rid of Ellie, just maybe get back to just Manny Diego and Sid. Who knows? We'll see what happens when Ice Age 6 comes out. Thanks for watching.